some explanation for that. We have none. Don't worry. Continue your program. Oh boy, it's really something super fantastic here. You couldn't ever imagine this. Roger. We know about that. Could you go the other way? Go back the other way.
Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you to the world's biggest digital space conference this year, organized by SDNx and Helium Learning Labs. My name is Sakshi, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Space Development Nexus and your host for today. This year's theme, the role of space education and research in emerging nations, was adopted to put a spotlight on the space activities in emerging nations and empower them further. We expect that through this summit, the students and the young space professionals can get guidance with their education and career. SDNx Foundation was established in the year 2013 with the purpose of making space accessible to everyone through its initiatives and educational projects supported by space research and development. Helium Learning Labs, who are our organizing partner, are an edtech company that aims to establish a world-class space education school to fill the gap between space education and the space industry, to train students for the future space workforce. Now, introducing our lovely speaker for today, Mr. Maheen. Mr. Maheen is currently the SGSC Co-National Point of Contact for South Africa and National Promoter for the World CanSat Rocketry Championship, WCRC. He also serves as a teaching assistant and research scientist at Wits University in Johannesburg. Maheen has a strong background in space science along with research interests centered around development of a novel electric propulsion system for the small satellite platform. Above all, Maheen is a young, dynamic individual with a keen interest in a community outreach in addition to working on highly impactful projects. Welcome, Maheen. I would request you to introduce yourself. We have a surprise for our audience today. And yeah, go ahead. The stage is all yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shakshi, for the wonderful introduction. Yeah, so I was told that this event is going to be broadcasted on Indian television live, so I thought I would send a message in Hindi. So, Namaskar, Space Development Nexus and Helium Learning Labs. मुझे इस कार्यक्रम में बोलने के लिए आमंत्रित करने के लिए धन्यवाद और मुझे आज अपने देश में अंतरिक्ष अनुसंधान और शिक्षा के बारे में बात करते हुए बहुत खुशी हो रही है. So I hope that was good. Yeah, maaf kijiye if it was bad. My Hindi is still elementary. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Just let me know if you can see it. Can you all see the screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to say was thank you to Helium Learning Labs and Space Development Nexus for inviting me to speak at this event. I'm very happy to talk about space research and education in my country. And hello to all the listeners, wherever you are viewing this from around the world. I hope you are well and in good health. Okay, so yeah, as Shakshi mentioned, my name is Maheen. I am currently the co-SGAC National Point of Contact for South Africa, although primarily I am also a graduate student doing some research in space propulsion technology. So here is a brief outline of what I'll be discussing today, and I thought it's appropriate to split my talk into 4 parts. In the first part, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of myself. You'll get to know who I am, my research interests, and how I hope my research can contribute towards space sustainability. I would also like to take you on a tour across South Africa and show you some of the interesting space-related projects that are currently being conducted. From there, I'd like to tell you a bit about the South African National Space Agency and their drive to promote STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math education. And lastly, I'd like to end off by telling you a little bit about an interesting event that's going to be taking place at the end of this year. Okay, so I guess it's mandatory to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. I was born in Johannesburg, for those of you who might not know, this is located towards the northern part of South Africa. And it's commonly been referred to as the City of Gold because it originated as a coal mining town. And I've been living here ever since birth, basically. Regarding my academic background, in 2019, I graduated with my Bachelor of Science degree. I specialized in astronomy and astrophysics from the University of Witwatersrand. And I'm currently finishing up my master's degree, although I have shifted my interests more towards engineering and applied physics research. In particular, I am interested in space-based electric micropropulsion systems. Now, since the theme of this year's summit is space research and education, I thought it would be appropriate for me to share with you some of the research that I have been doing. But before I do that, I just have to give you a bit of context. I'm sure many of you are aware of what a CubeSat is, but for those of you who are not aware, it's basically just a smaller, more compact cube-shaped satellite that weighs roughly between 1 and 10 kilograms. And these systems are deployed in space, usually to low Earth orbit, as secondary payloads on board larger launch vehicles. Now, the advantage of CubeSats are that they allow for low-cost access to space. This is due to their reduction in manufacturing costs, small size, and reduced mass relative to other conventional spacecraft. So collectively, these advantageous characteristics have led to an exponential increase in the total number of CubeSats that have been deployed into space. And this is great because it indicates that space is now becoming more accessible, especially to emerging nations. However, if you look at this green curve at the bottom here, you'll see that many of these small satellites have been launched without significant onboard propulsion systems, which may have some severe implications. The reason is because as the number of CubeSat launches is forecasted to grow in the coming years, at least for the foreseeable future, this means that there's going to be a lot more satellites that are going to be in orbit, specifically in low Earth orbit. And so low Earth orbit is going to become more congested. Subsequently, there is going to be a higher risk of in-orbit collisions that may occur between these orbiting satellites. And this can have some disastrous consequences, including significant losses in revenue for the commercial sector. So having an onboard propulsion system would allow the spacecraft to maneuver and avoid potential collisions. It can also be used as an end-of-life disposal mechanism, which will allow satellites to deorbit by entering Earth's atmosphere when they are out of commission. Now, unfortunately, integrating these miniaturized propulsion systems on the small satellite platform has proven to be quite challenging. This is mainly due to some of the power and mass budget restrictions that are imposed on these systems. As these small scales are very challenging to develop in micropropulsion systems that are energy efficient and reliable at these small scales. So this is where my research actually comes into play. And the general goal of my research is to basically study and carry out experimental tests on a new proof of concept for an electric plasma micropropulsion system. So the end goal is to engineer a system that meets the strict power and mass budget requirements to satisfy those set by the small satellite platform. And my hope is that such a system would also enable, as I mentioned, satellite deorbiting capabilities, which would thereby contribute to the United Nations long-term sustainability goals for outer space activities. Over here is a cute little picture I took of the system that I'm studying. And yeah, so I won't go into too much technical detail, but essentially, it basically utilizes a coupling mechanism that eliminates the need for complex components that would otherwise be required by conventional electric propulsion systems. And this, in principle, makes it, well, I hope it makes it more efficient and, yeah, reliable than other state-of-the-art micropropulsion systems on the market. Just for fun, I thought I'd show you the lab that I do all of my experiments in. As you can see, we have a pretty decent vacuum chamber, which we use to simulate the space environment and test out how our propulsion systems might behave in space. And we also have a bunch of electronics because we deal exclusively with electric propulsion systems. This is because electric propulsion is far more efficient than conventional chemical propulsion. The WITS Space Propulsion Lab has been in operation for over a decade now. So of course, there has been a lot of prior research conducted on different micropropulsion systems in that time. So I just thought I'd show you some of them. One of the systems that were developed was the Corona ionization thruster. Unfortunately, these days, the word corona has a lot of negative connotations attached to it. But in any case, there are various experimental tests found that the system wasn't very durable. It also wasn't very reliable, so it was very unstable. In fact, my research aims to directly address some of the shortcomings of the system. And you can check out this paper here if you want to find out more about some of the shortcomings of the Corona ionization thruster. And then another interesting system is the vacuum arc thruster. A lot of research has been done on that. It's very interesting because it utilizes solid metal as its propellant source. As you know, metals are quite abundant on asteroids. So this system could potentially use that propellant in situ from asteroids. So yeah, that's a very interesting prospect. And actually, one of my good friends, Paul, who I think is listening at the moment, he's doing his research on this system. Okay, so now that I've given you an overview of my research interests, I'd like to share my opinion on the wider impact of CubeSats on advancing STEM education, particularly in the context of South Africa. So I'll start off with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, who said, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, and involve me and I will learn." And I think that education, particularly in the context of STEM, that's the type of philosophy that we need to apply, a hands-on approach to learning and developing a technical skill set. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the reduced costs or the reduced manufacturing and launch costs of CubeSats have significantly improved the accessibility of space for emerging nations that are not able to invest in these large-scale space missions. This also means that academic institutions like universities can design, build, and even launch their own CubeSats to conduct in situ space research. Okay, so just to give you some examples of how this was done in South Africa, the first was the Stellenbosch University satellite, or SUNSAT, which was built mostly by graduate engineering students at Stellenbosch University down in the Western Cape. Now, technically, this system wasn't a CubeSat. It weighed about 64 kilograms, but it still is classified as a microsatellite. The reason I mention it is because it was actually the first miniaturized satellite that was designed and manufactured in South Africa and Africa as a whole. And it was launched in 1999, so about 22 years ago, at the Vandenberg Air Force Base in the USA. And this basically ushered in a new age of space exploration for South Africa and Africa as a whole. So here are the main goals of the SUNSAT program. The two of them were to train students in technologies and sciences of spacecraft construction and to get them to build a working satellite that was equipped with high performance remote sensing capabilities. In terms of CubeSats, the first CubeSat developed in South Africa was the ZA Cube 1. This was later renamed to Tshepiso-Sat, and in the indigenous language of Sotho, Tshepiso means promise, and it was given that name because of a grade 9 student who won a competition to name the satellite, so that was pretty cool. This CubeSat was launched in 2013 from Russia, and it was mainly used for space weather monitoring applications. Again, it was built mainly by students at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and they did it in collaboration with the French South African Institute of Technology, I think, yeah, and the University of Stellenbosch again. And so projects like these actually promote human capacity development and international collaboration, so it's very good. This here is an image that Tshepiso-Sat took of the Western Cape region. You can see the Cape Peninsula over here, so yeah, pretty awesome. Speaking of the Western Cape, I would say that the entire commercial space ecosystem of South Africa is located within this region. There are more than 10 dedicated upstream space companies that are in very close proximity with each other. And they are mainly involved in the development of satellite components, as well as satellite testing and consulting services. Few of them offer attitude determining control system solutions like reaction wheel sensor technologies, and they export to the global space market. In fact, there's an interesting new company called Hypernova Space Technologies that specializes in the development of next generation small satellite propulsion systems, which I find very interesting as well. So even though South Africa is heavily involved in satellite development and manufacturing, we currently do not have a dedicated independent launch capability. Launch capabilities in the past, most notably at the Overberg test facility in the Western Cape. But in the 90s, the launch pad was destroyed, and this was to accommodate the missile technology control regime in 1995. Now, given the projected growth of the space industry, which is expected to be just over $10 billion in the next 5 years, it begs the question as to whether we should be investing in developing indigenous launch capability in South Africa. And so this brings us to the east coast of South Africa, to KwaZulu-Natal, where a group of PhD students, and I think even undergrads, in the Aerospace Systems Research Group are currently working on the Sapphire project, which stands for the South African First Integrated Rocket Engine. This is basically a rocket engine that utilizes liquid propellant, liquid oxygen, and kerosene. And they intend to build an engine that can launch specifically small-sat vehicles into sun-synchronous orbit, or so about 400 kilometers above Earth's surface. And just to quote from their website, Sapphire offers an achievable pathway to the development of low-cost indigenous launch vehicles for the deployment of commercial spacecraft in the pico to micro satellite range, all from African soil. So I think it's pretty interesting. If you are interested in it, you can check out this website over here, which gives a lot of details about the system. They even have a nice little brochure which explains how it works. So do check that out. But that's not all that the Aerospace Research Group has been up to. Just recently in March this year, they successfully launched a hybrid sounding rocket, which was called the Phoenix 1B. And this rocket reached an altitude of about 18 kilometers, which currently now holds the highest record for the highest flown indigenous rocket in Africa. I've attached a URL to a video which you can watch where you can actually see the launch of the rocket. So yeah, go check it out. Now, of course, the central organization that's responsible for advancing space education and awareness in South Africa is the South African National Space Agency, or SANSA. Just to give you a brief bit of history, actually, South Africa's involvement in space dates back to the very beginning of the space age. So in the 1960s, South Africa was home to 14 of NASA's satellite tracking and acquisition network stations around the globe. Since then, this observatory has been providing telemetry, tracking, and command services to various international aerospace companies and space agencies. Then in 2008, the South African National Space Agency Act was passed, and this brought all of South Africa's space activities under one roof, which led to the formation of SANSA in 2010. So they just, I think, recently celebrated their 10th anniversary. Yeah. So SANSA has four main objectives, or four main focus areas, basically Earth observation, space engineering, space operations, and space science. And their mission is to provide leadership in unlocking the potential of space for the advancement and benefit of humanity. So far I've talked about space research and education at the tertiary level, or the academic level, but if we really want to advance space awareness, then I think we should begin at the grassroots level, so children in high school and even primary school. And SANSA has developed an initiative called the SANSA STEMI Outreach Project. And the goal of this project is to, of course, build a human capital pipeline to develop STEM-based skills, particularly in children at the high school level between 14 and 16 years old. Now, in order for this program to be sustainable and successful, there are a few requirements that need to be met. Firstly, there needs to be some kind of partnership that needs to occur between nonprofits, private entities, and to sort of push this program forward. The program needs to be scalable. Of course, here in South Africa, we have 9 provinces, so we try to scale the program such that it covers all of the entire space value chain across all 9 provinces. Then, of course, the technology that's used in the learning needs to be durable and not break very easily, also easy to use so that students stay engaged. We need to develop some sort of funding model that will ensure that the program is sustainable for many years to come. And lastly, it would be important to have some sort of metric so that measures the development of each individual and not just a group of individuals at any given point in time. So all this talk on space education and research again begs the question, why should we invest all this time, money, and resources in space education and awareness? Well, the United Nations has put forward 17 sustainable development goals for humanity, and it turns out that more than 50% of these goals are not fully solvable without some sort of space-based technologies. Some of these issues include climate and weather monitoring, access to healthcare and education, water management, efficiency in transportation and agriculture, peacekeeping, etc. So many of these issues are relevant to Africa as well. So this is why I believe Africa should, in particular, be investing in space activities. And so that's the perfect segue into the SGAC. I'm sure you've seen this a lot already, but essentially the SGAC is a global organization that supports the UN's goals on sustainable development, particularly those regarding the peaceful and sustainable use of outer space. And I'm proud to be an ambassador for the SGAC. So if you are a young professional or student who is enthusiastic about working and solving global problems, then I would encourage you to join. You can head on over to the SGAC website. I've left the link here. And remember that space is multidisciplinary, so people from any background could actually contribute. I mean, science, art, politics, there's working groups for everyone. Do check that out. Now, specifically in the context of Africa, the SGAC hosts the annual African Space Generation Workshop. Now, this is basically just a two-day regional workshop that brings together young professionals and students from across the continent, and it provides an opportunity for them to share their knowledge, ideas, and innovative practices with other students and individuals within the industry. It also provides a platform where they can express, again, their ideas and solutions to current problems at hand. So the last African Space Generation Workshop was successfully hosted after an initial postponement in 2020, and it was hosted in Accra, Ghana. The event was actually a great success despite the pandemic restrictions, so well done to the team. I think Charles from Cameroon spoke a little bit about it on Sunday. Yeah, well done to them. And I thought I would use this opportunity at least to announce that the 5th African Space Generation Workshop is coming to South Africa. So yeah, it will be hosted at the beautiful city of Stellenbosch, which is not too far from Cape Town. We're planning on hosting it on the 25th to the 27th of November this year, and it will be held in conjunction with the first African Symposium on Small Satellites. Now, due to COVID, it most probably will be a hybrid event. Nevertheless, we expect to have at least 100 delegates from Africa. So currently, we are building an organizing team, working on the event logo, the website, and building the scholarships for students who are not financially able to travel but would like to attend the workshop. And I would encourage you to follow any updates on the Space Generation website. So do keep a lookout for that. And if you are interested in attending the event, this is what you can look forward to experiencing, or what we have planned. I won't go through everything, but yeah, you can pause the video and check it out, see if it interests you. But if you want to play a larger part, in other words, you want to be a volunteer to help one of the organizing teams, or even better, if you want to sponsor the event, which we would greatly appreciate, kindly contact the event managers. The event manager is Miss Leandy DeWitt, who has been absolutely fantastic at putting together the bid, and probably the reason why we ended up winning the bid to host it here in South Africa. So she's doing a really good job there. Alternatively, you can contact the deputy event manager, yours truly, at this email. And then, yeah, I guess you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. This is my URL, I guess. Yeah, so I'm always looking to make new friends. So yeah, be sure to connect with me there. So yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation, and thank you everyone for listening to me. I hope that it was informative. I hope that maybe I inspired you to pursue research in space, or to contribute towards solving some of the problems, space-related problems that we have. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed the tour of South Africa and some of the interesting projects that we have going on here. Hopefully you can come and visit this beautiful country when the pandemic is over. Sure. So I guess I'll be answering questions now.
Thank you, Maheen. Thank you for the great insights about South African space activities. I'm sure a lot of students will connect with you after this, or young professionals will join SGSC and join you in your projects. The first question that I wanted to ask you is that your field of research is in spacecraft micropropulsion, right? And how do you see this field of research developing in the upcoming years? And what is your vision for micropropulsion in the near future?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So yeah, I think micropropulsion is definitely developing pretty well. I think all across the world, there are lots of research groups working on different propulsion systems. At MIT, they have a very dedicated group who's working on, I think it's electrospray thrusters as well. So they have a startup company. And like here in South Africa, I mentioned the Hypernova Space Technologies, who's working on some innovative propulsion technologies there. So that's very exciting. Yeah, it's definitely developing. I definitely see a lot of small satellites being launched with propulsion systems, especially since now the concerns with space debris buildup and everything. In terms of my vision, well, yeah, I guess I really would like to see. Now this is probably in the further on in the future, but I would really like to see propulsion systems on CubeSats that could do interplanetary travel, and maybe open up like. So obviously, I said CubeSats give access to institutions to do space research, but having propulsion systems means that you could do all these complicated maneuvers like formation flying, and so you can have a constellation of CubeSats that can work in unison to do high-level scientific projects. And I'm very excited about the prospect of that. So it could revolutionize the way that we do science. And besides the fact that it's so accessible and not really expensive in comparison to like bigger space projects like Hubble Space Telescope and James Webb, which takes a very long time to go from conception to being launched into space and actually doing science. CubeSats can be launched at a faster rate, and there's obviously not that much. Well, you don't want those big projects to fail, but with CubeSats, there's more room for failure, at least because there's less hints there. So yeah, I would definitely like to see CubeSats with propulsion systems that can usher in a whole new way of doing space science research. Yeah.
Great. And you talked about, a lot about space projects related to, space technology and engineering. Are there any big projects in fundamental space science like astronomy that are currently going on in South Africa?
Yeah, so yeah, there's actually quite a lot. Of course, I couldn't cover everything, but yeah, so when we talk about space research, I guess it's not just a rocket technology or building satellites. It encompasses a wide spectrum of different topics, and that includes, obviously, as you said, astronomy, astrophysics, fundamental space science research. And so, yeah, one of the interesting projects now happening in South Africa is at the Karoo. They're building the square kilometer array. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's essentially an attempt to build the world's largest radio astronomy observatory here on the ground. And yeah, it's basically going to answer some of the deepest or some of the very interesting questions in fundamental cosmology, like obviously the birth of the first stars. I think they're going to try and test out Einstein's theory of general relativity. And one question in particular that's very interesting to me is, are we alone in the universe? Which is also very, if we could answer that question. Then I think when you talk about space science, one of the other interesting things is space weather, which apparently SANSA is very much involved in. They actually have a regional space weather monitoring center down in their headquarters in Hermanus. And so they've actually have plans to upgrade their facility to a 24/7 space weather monitoring center. And so they do research in like fundamental research in studying like the sun, its behavior, because obviously the sun dictates a lot of space of what space weather is going to be like. And it's very important fundamental research because it has so many implications for us here on Earth. As you might know, we use radio communications, and if space weather is so when the sun releases high energy particles, it obviously disrupts some of our communication in the upper atmosphere as well. So it has some direct implications to us here on Earth in the aerospace industry as well. So just some interesting projects that are going on in space science here in South Africa.
Yeah, it's very interesting, like the square kilometer area. I'm quite familiar with it because I was in Perth. So if you know about ICRAR, so that's the
Yeah, but
International Center for Radio Astronomy. So my university was associated with them, so I'm quite familiar with the project, and that's going to change a lot of things for us, in the future. So we talked about education. Space education in particular, and how that can affect our future. So what are the main challenges or obstacles that South Africa faces in their attempts to expand space education and raise awareness of the benefits of investment in space research?
yeah, sure. That's a good question. So here in South Africa, we definitely have got a lot of drive to push space education at the moment, but unfortunately, our history is not that great. We were in apartheid for most of our history, and only really gained independence in about 1994. So that has really impacted a lot in terms of, because at the time a lot of people were segregated based on racial profiling and so forth. And so we have a lot of people who are coming from underprivileged backgrounds who don't have access to a lot of things. So those are some of the challenges of trying to get space education to those people in those remote communities. But there are plenty of projects that are in place to help that, but certainly a lot of challenges. The other thing is when you look at education, especially at high school level, um, the math and science pass rates aren't really that high. So I think a lot of research needs to go into why that is the case. But also something that's making it worse is that the government is actually decreasing the pass requirements to get into university for STEM subjects especially. So that's not really helping much. But hopefully they can come up with solutions in the future. Yeah.
And do you think that, just extending on this question, because I was talking about privatization of space, even in India, there's a lot of development going on in the private industry in space. We have a lot of startups that are coming up. So, like, do you think that privatization of space, and you mentioned some space startups that you're excited about in your presentation as well. So, connecting the dots, do you think that privatization of space can actually develop intern like space education, and also like encourage government to invest more into the research?
Yeah, sure. So I definitely think that that's definitely a positive thing, because it encourages people from very, like I said, space is multidisciplinary, so it encourages people from different backgrounds to get engaged in space. So now you have people who specialize in space policy and business, and space medicine is now becoming a big thing as well. So no, it's great that we're commercializing space. I guess it's also it's difficult for government agencies to run the whole show, I guess. So yeah, you can sort of outsource some of the work to privatize companies. Like for instance, SpaceX has done that pretty well. Yeah, so here in South Africa, we're definitely doing a good job with that, I guess. Yeah.
Perfect. And how do you think the space industry will look in the next decade? Because there's so much going on. Even like this year, there were so many things that were introduced. For example, reality TV show just for, to send people in space, and there are a lot of analog astronauts projects that are being popularized and coming ahead. So how do you what will even world look like maybe in a decade or so on the space industry?
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about that, but it's yeah, definitely. I think I would love to see human beings expand beyond the Earth and hopefully visit Mars. I know there was Elon Musk has promised that he would send people to Mars by 2024. I'm not sure. Is that correct? Yeah, but hopefully in my lifetime I get to see that, or maybe even be a part of it. Like, I wouldn't mind visiting Mars, although I would like to come back, preferably. But yeah, space exploration, especially human space exploration, will be very interesting. But I would love to also see some interplanetary, sort of interstellar exploration as well. I'm not sure if you've seen the Breakthrough Starshot program, which aims to send spacecraft to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system. So I don't know if that would be a reality in the next few years. Yeah, at some point we could even venture into interstellar space. That would be really awesome. Hopefully in my lifetime. Yeah.
Well, I hope that in my lifetime as well, if we can do something like Star Trek or something like that. So just moving on to fun questions as well, as we're discussing about these things. So what is your favorite science fiction, space sci-fi movie or show that you would like to recommend our audience?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think a lot of people probably said Interstellar, right? Because
Yeah.
it was very yeah. Now I'll be different and I'll say I don't know if you've seen the movie Arrival with
I have, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. No, that was a very interesting movie because it depicted aliens in a different light. So like
Mm-hmm.
normally you see in Hollywood aliens that are bipedal. Basically, they're sort of
Mm-hmm.
modeled after human beings, which is, I guess, very human centric. So yeah, to see aliens like that was very interesting, and yeah, the whole philosophy behind it with the language that they spoke and how they communicated so effectively is something that we can probably learn because as humans, probably communication is maybe the biggest challenge. There's so much of ambiguity in the way we communicate. So if you can find more efficient ways of communicating, that'd be great. And then, because we're in India, I thought I'd mention a Bollywood movie. So when I was a kid, actually, my sister used to watch Bollywood movies. So I remember one movie called Koi Mil Gaya.
You're right.
Have you watched that movie?
I think that's the
Yeah,
only like good sort of extraterrestrial alien movie that has been in Bollywood.
yeah,
As of now, we are moving towards sort of a culture now that we are going to make movies about ISRO and space, because it's becoming a big thing now.
yeah,
But I think that's the thing, right? Even a culture effect of any movies or something like that, that sort of affects everyone, and that's how space education affects the industry affects the space education as well. And as you were talking about aliens and extraterrestrial life, so if you met an alien, like what would be your first word to him or her?
uh, well, firstly, I would say, well, that presupposes that the alien is friendly, because if he's hostile, then I'm probably not gonna be alive to ask a question. But if
True, yeah.
assuming that the alien is friendly, I would probably want to know about their culture, what food they eat, if they even eat food. Do they listen to music? What type of music do they have? Yeah, things like that. Do they follow rituals like we humans do? Dating and all that type of stuff. Like, is that like universal thing or only like human? So that would be very interesting. Yeah, I would love to know that.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think the last question that I would ask you is that what kind of, kind of suggestion you want to give to, young professional in the space industry, or students who are out there listening to your talk or will listen to your talk in the future, to just get into the space industry, how to network, or like something you would personally suggest adapting from your life as a space professional.
Yeah, so obviously hard work and dedication. I guess it's a bit cliche now, but yeah, no, it's definitely got me far to be very tenacious because if I must be honest, I'm not really that great of a student, at least, but I managed to find my way. Anyway, yeah, so join organizations like SGAC. There's other organizations like the Moon Village Association. Get involved, volunteer. This, I mean, in the past year, because I've joined SGAC for now a year now, and I've already been appointed as the NPOC for South Africa. I've met so many people so far, and yeah, like I got the chance to work on this upcoming African Space Generation workshop. So it's a lot of professional development and learning how to project manage and so forth. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for growth. So I would recommend you join some form of organization and outreach. It's also very rewarding to be a part of something bigger. So that, and yeah, keep working hard, keep working smart actually. And yeah, I think space is gonna blow up in the next few years if it hasn't already.
I think it has already. I mean, I
Sure.
feel,
Yeah.
I honestly feel so lucky to be like in this time, and also like people in the space industry are very open to connect. That's what I have felt since I have been in the space industry, and it's been like only 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months, and my network has just grown by the time. And I think, yeah, so I think whatever you said is true. Just the dedication and the grit, to go on. In the industry, if you want to achieve something. Thank you so much, Mr. Maheen. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you progress in your projects and everything, and please visit India, and we would try to visit South Africa.
Yeah, no, I've actually
Alright.
I wanted yeah, sorry, I wanted to travel to Himachal Pradesh. I've seen some pictures,
Mhm.
so maybe sometime in the future. Maybe I'll come visit Space Development Nexus as well. Like,
Definitely, you can ping us.
yeah,
We will join you.
yeah, sure.
In Himachal Pradesh. All right. Thank you. Shukriya. That's what we call it in Hindi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right.
Okay, it's my
Okay, Nitin,
pleasure.
let us know when the live is over. Okay.
It's really something super fantastic here. You couldn't ever imagine this. Roger.